All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to coming to our Domestic Violence 101 Domestic Violence training for October for Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Some of you may recognize my voice. My name is Megan. I am currently our outreach and training specialist here at Domestic Violence. Oh, excuse me. I have to use the saying our new name, formerly Domestic Violence and Child Advocacy Center. We are now Journey Center for Safety and Healing. So some of you may recognize our new logo, our new name. We are very, very excited to announce that in conjunction with October and Domestic Violence Awareness Month. With that being said, Journey Center for Safety and Healing has the same mission and the same vision. We provide services that foster safety and healing to those affected by domestic violence and child abuse, and prevents abuse through advocacy, education, and systemic change. So we really want folks to know, regardless of whether they've experienced child abuse or domestic violence, we want people to know that they deserve to feel safe and loved in all of their relationships, and feel that they deserve and know that they deserve to be in a healthy relationship. With all of that being said, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and we are so excited to bring awareness, energy, and just kind of have conversations around domestic violence. Here are a couple of events throughout October. Next Monday, we are going to be having a Chalk It Up for Healthy Relationships event. This can be held wherever you are, throughout the community, home, work, school, your neighbor's house, social distancing, of course. But write messages of support and encouragement to those who may be experiencing domestic violence at home, or it could be just a simple message of you are not alone, you deserve to feel loved. We also, Thursday, October 22nd, is National Wear Purple Day. So folks in our community as well as around the country will be wearing purple. So wear your purple, take a selfie, hashtag Wear Purple Day, and also tag us. We will take your photos, we will share them so that everyone knows that people are wearing purple and supporting healthy relationships. We also have 2 Domestic Violence Awareness Month town halls towards the end of the month, and 1 in November. We really want you to attend. Let us know what you're thinking or what you want to see happen in your community and how we can help support that. We're also throughout every Tuesday in October promoting a video around a different conversation called Let's Talk Tuesday. Yesterday, we shared a video about what is domestic violence. And so stay tuned, follow us on social media to see what other themes and what things we'll be talking about. And lastly, we have Friday Facts. So join us every Friday on Instagram, where we'll be having a different sort of subject, but also answering your questions. So those are up on our Instagram stories. You can submit them. They are completely anonymous. With all of that being said, we're going to kind of talk very basically about domestic violence today, go over 101 and give some key points on how to help, including things to say or not say. And so just a reminder that even when we're talking about this regularly or all the time, talking about domestic violence can trigger feelings or memories. So please remember to take care of yourself. If that means you take a deep breath like this, please do. So this is just a simple reminder to pause, take a breath. There's a lot going on in the world, not only with it being Domestic Violence Awareness Month, but also with COVID and the pandemic, and the cold weather is setting in, and there's an election cycle, and we're all really looking at and talking about the racial injustices in our country. So please take that breath. So let's talk domestic violence. We hear these numbers a lot. We hear all of the time that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men will experience some form of domestic violence. The one thing that I think is so important to point out with that statistic is that that is severe physical violence. So that's not including the verbal or the emotional abuse. That's also including that physical violence. On average, 24 people per minute are victims of rape, physical violence, or stalking by an intimate partner. With that being said, it's important to recognize that domestic violence does cross all racial, cultural, socio-economical, and religious lines. It does occur in all types of relationships. This can be same-sex, it can be heteronormative relationships. However, women are the most frequent victims of domestic violence. Specifically, young women aged 16 to 34 generally experience the highest rate. And then we also have to consider that women of color and Black women in particular experience an even higher level or an even higher rate of domestic violence. It's also important to recognize the impact that domestic violence has on children, right? So more than 15 million children in the US live in homes where domestic violence has happened at least once. Many children are exposed to violence in their home. And with that, children who witness abuse are often victims of emotional, physical, or sexual abuse. One thing that I hear often when I'm working with clients is that, well, but they're a good parent, right? They're a good father. They support. And we never want to say, well, no, they're not. But what I like to do is ask, tell me more about that, right? So you say they're a good parent, tell me more. And then I find that most of the time, that can really open us up to having those conversations about healthy relationships, modeling healthy boundaries, modeling healthy ways to express those quote unquote negative emotions, whether that be anger, sadness, or any of those things. All right. And so what is domestic violence, right? We looked at the numbers, but what is it? So I think it's important, and those of you who have been in trainings with me before know that I always talk about this because it's so important to know that legal definition. So in order for it to reach that legal standard, what we want to look at is what's going on that you're afraid for your physical safety today. What that looks like is a recent physical harm or recent threats of physical harm. So this doesn't always take into account that financial or that emotional abuse or even that sexual abuse. In order to get the police involved or in order to file for a protection order, they really want to know, and I shouldn't say to get police involved, but in order for them to maybe press charges, if that's what the client wants or if that's what that victim wants, there needs to be that physical harm. The other important thing to recognize with this is that it has to be actions directed toward a family or household member. So if I am dating my partner and we have never lived together, we are not married, and we do not have children in common, as an advocate, that's domestic violence. But what you're going to see that show up as in the criminal system is it's going to be an assault charge. So those are really important things, because what we don't want to happen is just to tell our clients or folks we're working with, oh, just go file a police report. Oh, just file a protection order. And it doesn't reach this legal standard. And what may happen is we increase the harm for our clients. And so as advocates, we are all looking at it as this broader social definition, right? You all are going to hear me or have heard me say power and control approximately 30 something more times over the course of the next 50 minutes or so. But domestic violence is when one person intentionally causes physical or emotional harm to a partner. It is when one person uses abuse to establish that power and control. And that intentionally is really important, right? So we've all been in situations where we get annoyed, where we get angry, where we get frustrated. And maybe we yelled at our partner, or maybe we yelled at someone, and we recognize that, oh, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have raised my voice. And so what we do is we work to change that behavior, right? I may or may not have been told in certain relationships that I have a quote unquote attitude. And I will admit that I do, right? I'm a strong personality, but that doesn't mean that I'm abusive. What it means is that I'm aware that sometimes I can come across strongly. And so I have to know that when I get angry, and I've learned over the course of my 30 some years that I need to walk away. And so it's that intentional. Abusers are making a choice, because so often we hear, well, domestic violence is just an anger management issue. It is not. Folks that make the choice to abuse their partners are already very good at managing their anger, right? If it was about anger management, I would get mad at maybe something went wrong with my email, right? I referenced at the beginning, we are not in the middle of, we rebranded. And so maybe my email wasn't working or something was going on. And so an anger management issue would be me yelling at the IT person or me yelling at the HR person or me getting super frustrated on my drive home if I'm going into the office and flipping off the person next to me, right? That's an anger management problem. But what happens is an abuser doesn't yell at the IT person. They don't yell at their HR person. They might kind of get annoyed at the person driving down the street, but they're waiting until they get home, or they're waiting till they're around that person that they're supposed to love and care about, and that's who they're yelling at. That's who they're expressing their anger towards. I think it's also really, really important to recognize, and especially with younger folks or people who maybe are new to having intimate relationships or serious relationships, is that relationships exist on a spectrum. Friendships, intimate relationships, dating relationships, right? What I hope for all of us and everyone that we're working for is that they have a healthy relationship, right? So one built on respect, healthy communication. You'll know that it's not a certain type of communication. We each have to learn over the course of our lives what healthy communication is for us. I'm a much more direct person. Just tell me, I'll tell you. No one's feelings are getting hurt. But I know that certain friends are much more, I want to say soft, but they want me to approach them in a much not as direct way. So we have to learn how to communicate with one another in that way that's healthy for both of us. Trust, right? I was our teen advocate for a little while, and what I would always tell the youths when they would say, oh, well, I don't trust my partner, and I look through their phone is, if you don't trust someone, why are you in a relationship with them? Trust is a foundation. Now, trust grows over time, but if you don't trust your partner, that's not a good sign, right? Honesty, I'm sorry, I messed up. We have to take accountability. Individuality, so we're both still our own people. We both still have our own friends or activities or things that we like. And equality. So this is important too, because it might not be 50-50 all the time. We all have good days and bad days, but overall, it's 50-50, right? Tuesday, I'm going to step up. Tomorrow, my partner's going to step up because we recognize that in one another. We start to get into that unhealthy, and that's where that inconsiderate behavior, my partner's not thinking about, my plans, or my partner's not thinking about what I want to do. There's breaks in communication, that dishonesty or that pressure starts to come in, and that lack of trust starts to come in. What's going on? We start to second guess, or our partner starts to second guess or accuse us of things, right? And that abusive, none of these things should be in any person's relationship, right? That manipulation, that blame shifting. Oh, well, I only yelled at you because of HR, right? I only got mad at you because dinner wasn't ready. So an abusive person is never going to take on that responsibility for when they mess up. Accusations, control, isolation, or that mistreatment, right? Another thing that I think is so important to have really complex and really to have conversations with the folks that we care about is unhealthy might look different for each of us, right? So that breaks in communication, I come back to think about how I communicate. So as a direct person, I'm going to vibe a little bit more with someone who is also direct versus someone who's a little bit more skirting the issues. Whereas my best friend, right, her and her partner are amazing together. But me and her husband would not be amazing together. So I think that's really important to consider as well. And so I referenced this a little bit earlier, that it's a momentary loss of temper. These are things that we think frequently, but we have to challenge, right? The victim can always just walk away from this relationship. That's the perpetual, why does she stay? Why do they stay? Why don't they just leave question that we hear all the time. It's so much more complicated than that. Number one, and really important, is that leaving is the most dangerous time. When someone makes a choice to walk away from that relationship, that's when their danger increases. That's when their risk for lethality is at the highest. So we want folks to leave when they're ready and when they're able and when it is safe, right? We'll also talk a little bit later, but I want us to think about, we've all been in relationships in high school and college when we were young, whatever it was, that you look back now and you're like, oh gosh, why didn't I date that person? Ugh, right? But you stayed with it because they were really great, or you like them and like, okay, they do these things, but meh, I guess I'll stay. And that might not even have been abusive, but we stay because we care about that person. And so I want us to then, as we start talking and breaking down the types of abuse, it gets harder to leave when it is abusive. If an abuser is truly sorry and promises not to do it again, the abuse will stop. We all make mistakes. We all mess up. The difference is, as healthy people, we actively work to change those behaviors, right? And abuse is always an escalating pattern. Absolutely, when we talk about the cycle of violence, we'll look at that, but it isn't always. It often follows a pattern, but not always, because abusers like to keep their victims on their toes. And so when we're looking at types of abuse, this is when I say we, us, a journey center that we use, right? Verbal and emotional abuse, physical abuse, digital abuse, sexual abuse, and financial abuse. And so looking at verbal and emotional abuse, and you'll notice a couple of these are bolded, because what I think is important is we're still living in a pandemic, right? And now we are also starting to enter fall and winter. So weather is going to cool down and we're going to be staying in our homes more. And so we're kind of going back to those early days of March and April. And there is still a potential, right, for us to have stay-at-home orders again. We kind of don't know what the world is going to look like in another month or 2 or 3. And so I want us to stay centered in the state of the world currently. But verbal and emotional abuse is any non-physical behavior that a partner does to manipulate or, again, control. So looking at the pandemic, this could be providing misinformation, right? Or this could be providing misinformation about voting, right? Early voting started, but maybe my abusive partner is telling me, because they don't want me to have that voice. They don't want me to be able to vote. So they're saying, oh no, you can't do that. That's not till later, right? It could be name calling and put downs. It could be not allowing access to spiritual resources or services. So not allowing folks to safely access what they want. So this could be like, oh no, your church is still closed. Oh no, the church is still doing virtual, but we don't have the access to Zoom, right? Threats to harm, it could be you, right? If you leave me, I'll kill you. If you leave me, I'll take the kids, right? It could be threats to harm the kids. If you leave me, I'm going to take the one thing that you care about most. I'm going to take those kids. I'm going to harm the kids. Hey, if you leave me, I know where all your friends and family live and stay. Or if you tell anyone, I know where your family is. So I'm going to harm your loved ones or your pets. On the opposite end, it also could be threats to harm themselves. If you leave me, if you tell anyone, I'm going to harm myself. I'm going to take my own life. And I will say I've been, one of those gut punch moments. I was with a group of young folks and I was talking about this, and I had one young lady say, well, Megan, you say that, but my partner did harm themselves. And so this is a real fear. I'll speak for myself. I don't want to be responsible for someone harming themselves or taking their own life. And so maybe if I'm in an abusive situation, I'm going to stay a little bit longer. I'm going to stay until this partner, this person, because I love them, right? I don't like how they're treating me, but I still care about them. So I'm going to stay until they get the help that they need, right? This could be constant monitoring, who you talk to, who are you Zooming with, whose backyard are you hanging out with. It could be those stalking behaviors, putting tracking devices on cars, or cameras up, security system in the home, but now that camera is watching where I'm going, or that security system now tells my abusive partner when I'm leaving the house and when I'm coming home, right? It could also be withholding affection or the silent treatment, right? Not letting that partner know that they love and they care about them, and making that victim work for that partner's affection. Physical abuse. This one is so important, because what I hear all the time, and what I'm sure some of you all have heard, is that, well, my partner doesn't hit me, so it's not domestic violence. Or my partner, it's not as bad as what I'm seeing on the news or what I'm seeing on TV shows. So my situation isn't really that bad. Victims and all of us are so good at minimizing, so we really have to expand our definition of physical violence. Yes, it's hitting. Yes, it's pushing, kicking, biting, scratching. But it could also be throwing objects, right? It could be blocking entrances. If you're not going to leave this room or this house or this whatever until you do what I want you to do or say what I want you to say, right? Threatening to use weapons against you. And so maybe it's just my partner accidentally, right, quote unquote, accidentally leaves this gun on the counter. And to someone else, that might not be a thing, but to me, I know that that means that they're angry, that means that they're threatening me with that gun, right? It could be reckless driving. And so it's really important for us to talk with our clients or talk with our loved ones that, like, when they start saying those things, well, my situation's not that bad. We're not comparing to others, right? I get asked that question all the time. Well, Megan, have you ever been in an abusive relationship? It's not about me. Right now, it's about you. And in my experience as an advocate, this is what I can tell you. We really want to keep that focus on the victim or whoever we're talking with, because in that moment, it is about them. Sexual abuse. So this one, I think similarly to physical violence, if it's not rape or forced sex, it's not that bad, right? Well, my situation wasn't what I'm hearing on the news. But sexual abuse could also be that coercive control or that coercive behavior. So think about a little kid that wants to go to the park and we're like tired. I don't want to go to the park. This little kid, come on, Megan, let's go to the park. Come on, come on, come on. And sometimes eventually we go to the park because going to the park is much easier than having a little kid tug at my sweater or tug at my side for hours and hours and hours. And so that might happen in abusive relationships. It's easier to have sex than to get physically assaulted. It's easier to have sex. And I want to say, I'm using easier as a kind of like in quotes, right? Easier to just go along with something so that I don't get accused of something or I don't get yelled at for hours. Sexual abuse could also be controlling or disrupting birth control, right? Maybe not allowing my partner, there's a pandemic, you're not going to the store, so you're not getting your prescriptions. It could be demanding sex. It could be ignoring feelings or boundaries, right? So we come back to that spectrum of we have the responsibility to say like, hey, you know what? I'm just kind of in a bad mood today. My partner needs to respect that. So if I say no, it means no. It's not convince me or talk me into, right? Making their partner feel as though they have to do something because they're in a relationship. So this could be sending a photo, right? Hey, send me a photo. I don't want to. Well, you're in a relationship with me, so this is what they're doing. It could be, well, if you won't have sex with me or if you won't do this sexual act, then I'm going to cheat. It could also be accusing them of cheating, right? So again, it's looking at any time someone's ignoring that boundary or ignoring my personal space. Financial abuse. This one is we are really seeing a huge impact with survivors in financial abuse. So many people have lost their jobs, have been furloughed. You know, the extra $600 for unemployment ran out. And so maybe it's easier for me to stay because I know I have a roof over my head, right? I don't like how my partner is, but I don't want myself and my kids to be homeless. And so financial abuse can be that impact of unemployment. It can be selling or destroying property. It could be disrupting access to unemployment or maybe the stimulus money, right? A lot of survivors did not receive their stimulus check because their abuser took it from them. It could be preventing a partner from accessing the bank accounts, withholding supplies. It could be stealing money, right? Refusing to give money for necessities. I've had clients tell me in the past that when they go grocery shopping, they have to bring their partner back a receipt. So not only do they have to count, you know, it takes 15 minutes to drive to the store, you should be in there for 20 minutes and 15 minutes to drive back. If you're not back within an hour, it's because you're cheating, right? But they also have to provide that receipt to show what it is that they spend money on. I also want to say that one thing that's not on here, it could also be making their partner put the lease or put the mortgage in their name or not putting the mortgage in their name. So maybe this looks like, hey, Megan, we're going to move in together. Let's put the lease in your name because my credit's not great. We'll get a better whatever. I'll still pay rent, but let's put it in your name. But then my partner stops paying rent. Now my credit's going to get messed up. Or on the flip end, let's put the lease or the mortgage in my partner's name. And now when it comes down to it, even though it's a shared house, I'm going to have to be the one that leaves when the police are called or when my partner evicts me or whatever it is. Digital abuse. So this is a misuse, of technology from one part to another. So this could be stalking on social media, tracking locations, humiliating on social media, accessing accounts. So often, and I think it's getting better, but you know, technology is still so new and is still so rapidly evolving that, you know, there's those apps that let me track my kids where they are that are designed for safety, that are great for safety. But now my abusive partner is tracking me on those apps on a map, is tracking me through my location settings, is demanding that I share my password so they can see and say, why is so-and-so DMing you? Why is so-and-so liking all of your photos, right? It could be not allowing a partner to talk to family or friends. So I'm working from home. And so it could be that my partner is also working from home. And so now work used to be a safe space for me. But now through digital abuse, my partner is tracking my Zoom calls. My partner is sitting next to me and knowing if I say anything, or, as we go back to, the cold weather and maybe more Zoom happy hours. So maybe my partner, I no longer have that outlet and they're always, always watching what I'm doing. I want to also say this is a super, super brief overview of types of abuse. We could go on and on and on. Does anyone have any questions or things that you all have seen that come to your brain when talking about any of these types of abuse? All right, cool. So I think it's important that when we're thinking about these things, that this is often, and not always, but often happening in what we call the cycle of violence. So I want us to think back when we've, started dating our partners or, our spouses or whoever it is. There's that really exciting time. This cycle of violence should never, ever happen. But what happens in abusive relationships is I really like when my partner is calling me all the time and texting me all the time. It makes me feel wanted, right? Over time, that evens out. But what happens in abusive relationships is something shifts and that tension starts to build. And maybe it is, hey, Megan, I know you and Adam are really good friends, but I don't know, I've hung out with him a couple times and something about how he looks at you, it makes me feel uncomfortable. Maybe only spend time with Adam when I'm around or in groups. And I want to respect my partner, right? We've all been in those situations where we have a partner and we do not like their friend, right? We know their motives. And so that's normal. We've all been there. We all know people who have been there. And so I want to respect that my partner doesn't necessarily like Adam. And so, okay. And then what happens is, Megan, I know you've been hanging out with Adam in groups, but now only hang out with Adam when I'm there. Right? I said sometimes, or now it's only when I'm there. Okay. Hey, Megan, maybe I don't want you hanging out with Adam at all. And it's really easy to see that from hanging out with Adam to not hanging out with Adam, but it's not as easy to see that subtleties of step-by-step isolation. Yeah, and that's right. And so we abuse, and so we're talking about domestic violence in the context of intimate relationships. And so if we go back to looking at any types of relationship, this can be abusive, right? So it's so important to model healthy relationships in friendships, with coworkers, with family members, right? That's a good point. Yeah. So coming back to the cycle of violence, right? So that tension building, so that all of a sudden I'm feeling something is off, right? Something doesn't feel quite right. I'm not hanging out with Adam anymore. And it kind of is that walking on eggshells, right? Did anyone ever get in trouble in school with your guardians or your parents, your grandparents, and you got that walking on eggshells type of feeling? And that can happen in abusive relationships. And then what happens is that violence. And it could be any of those things. It could be the yelling, the name calling, the put downs. It could be the physical abuse. It could be the sexual abuse. It could be any of those things that we just referenced, right? What happens after the violence stage is the honeymoon. And so that honeymoon means, baby, I'm so sorry. I had a really bad day. My boss was being a real jerk. And I went to this webinar and this girl was like, blah, 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 blah. And I'm really sorry and it won't happen again. And this is where we all know that we've messed up, our partners have messed up. And so we forgive them because this isn't happening a weekend. This isn't happening on a first date, right? This is happening 6 months, a year, once I get pregnant, once we get married, right? So I'm already invested in this relationship. And a one-time thing is not that big of a deal. But then what happens is the tension happens again and the violence and the honeymoon. And most of the time, the honeymoon phase is gonna shrink, right? So that tension building and that violence fade is going to get larger and larger as the isolation increases, right? Don't talk to Adam. I don't like your family. I see how your family looks at me. Let's not go to Sunday dinners anymore. Let's skip out on this Zoom call just this one time. And that just this one time turns into all of the time. And so now we have to look at, I want to leave, but I don't. And that's what happens with that cycle of violence. It's also really important to point out that the cycle of violence could be hypothetically weekly, right? It's every Monday, or it's, but it could also be monthly. It could also be yearly. And so if it's not happening often, is it easier to put up with one day of abusive behavior versus, 1 out of 30, and those other 29 days are really, really great, and I feel really, really loved. That's really, really confusing for victims or folks who are experiencing domestic violence. And so how would you know, right? How do you know if a friend, a loved one, or a client, or someone that we're around is experiencing domestic violence? So this is not a definitive list, but these are things that I want us to think about, right? So it could be frequent lateness or sudden absence. So maybe if you're a therapist and you have a client that is always 5 or 10 minutes late, right? And you think, oh my gosh, they're late again. This is so annoying. I have to get my, productivity up, and it's, or all of a sudden they're not there, right? It could be that they forgot about it. It could be that they ran into traffic, but if it's something that's happening often, this is a time for us to open up that conversation. It could be fear or references to their partner's anger. So when we're talking to someone at, a socially distanced barbecue, and they seem to continue to look over at their partner, and they say, oh yeah, well, last night they got really angry, or last night, they got really upset. Can't even use that the Browns lost. They got really, really overjoyed at the Browns winning. And so, then they got upset with whatever it was. And it feels off, right? We're going to talk to and lean on our support folks. We're going to talk to our friends about our partners and their annoyances. But paying attention to how often it occurs, and is there a frequent reference of anger? It could be bruises, scratches, other injuries. It could be decreased productivity or attentiveness. So maybe you're talking to your friend at that barbecue and they're spaced out and they're not really, giving you full attention. It could be that they're tired. I think we also have to give space and allow grace for folks right now because of the world. But paying attention to these subtleties. Maybe you've noticed that your friend or your loved one or your client seems to be more depressed or more anxious. They have those inappropriate displays of emotions, right? So they're crying all of a sudden, or they're really, really happy, or they're vacillating between the two awkwardly. It could be insufficient resources to live on. Coming back to that financial abuse, maybe my partner has suddenly taken away my budget or taking away my access to cards, so debit cards, credit cards. And so you notice that they are eating more at the barbecue than they used to, or they're like, hey, can I take these leftovers? It could be that you notice, their gas tank's always on empty. Really looking at what that is. It could be increased secrecy. So maybe this is a friend, or maybe this is a client that used to tell you everything. You would meet monthly, or you would do your case management check-ins, and your client used to tell you all of these things, and now they haven't. And now they've started to hold things a little bit closer. It could be constant thoughts or obsession with their partner. So I think this is something that happens and is kind of normal when someone starts dating someone new. Like, and then did you hear that Megan did this? And she's really great. And then Megan, and we're kind of like, okay, we get it. You're happy, yay, new relationship. Again, that should fade over time. But if it's constantly months into the relationship, years into the relationship, and they're still always talking about their partner, that may be a red flag, right? Making excuses for their partner. We're at said barbecue and my partner yells at the person at the barbecue. They're not barbecuing, but Jack is barbecuing. And all of a sudden my partner blows up at Jack and storms away. And I say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. They've had a really, they've not been sleeping. We're really stressed out because we're not sure if they're going to get furloughed or not. And I'm really, really sorry for their, for the way they acted. Victims and survivors will take on, right, their partner's behaviors because oftentimes they feel as if only I was a better partner, if only I did these things my partner told me to do, then I wouldn't have to worry about it, right? controlling behaviors, so controlling who their partner sees, where they go, what they do. So you could see less or no participation in certain events or activities. It could be more isolation from friends or families. One partner telling the other they can never do anything right. Extreme jealousy. And I want to take a moment and talk about jealousy. Jealousy is normal, right? Especially for young folks. When we're having these conversations, it's so important for us to acknowledge, like, you're going to get jealous, right? You're going to feel whatever. But what makes it healthy, unhealthy, or abusive is how we display that jealousy. So an easy example is my partner and I are at the grocery store, he goes down the cereal aisle and I go down, to get butter, whatever it is. I come back and I see him talking to someone and I think, oh, she's really cute. Oh, look at her shoes. Oh, I wonder who this is, right? I don't know this girl. They're chit-chatting, and as I walk up, she walks away. And in a healthy relationship, I might say to my partner, oh, who was that? My partner says, oh, that's so-and-so. We used to work together. Cool. That trust is there. So I might say, oh, great. I really liked her shoes, like whatever it is. And I move on because I'm not concerned about it, right? Because that trust is there. In that unhealthy relationship, I might say, she's kind of cute. Y'all used to work together. Like, tell me a little bit more. And I'm going to push it, right? I'm going to push it a little bit further. In that abusive relationship, I'm going to say, oh, y'all used to work together. Nope, I saw how she was looking at you. I saw how you were looking at her. If we pass her again in the grocery store, you are not to have contact. You are to look down. Like, I do not. And it could be, I do not trust her, or it could be, I do not trust you, right? And it could be something that partner is straight up saying. And so again, coming back to how are we responding, or how is my partner, or how are our friends' partners responding when we're in these certain situations? It could be discouraging their partner from seeing family or friends, insults, demeaning. This is not often going to happen in front of friends or family, but when it does, it's time to check in. That means it's escalated beyond keeping it private, right? One partner prevents the other from making decisions. Certainly we all have moments where, what's for dinner? I don't know. I need you to decide. I am tired. That's okay. But if it's constantly, I'm going to choose, I'm going to choose, I'm going to choose, that's where we really need to look at it. Another example I think of often that's sort of relatable is being a stay-at-home parent, right? Some folks want to make that decision. My best friend wants to be a stay-at-home parent, and she is really, really good at it. And I've known that that's something she's wanted to do since I met her, since before she met her husband. I have no doubts that that is a choice that they made together. However, maybe it's not. So looking at, if we have a friend who never expressed interest in wanting to be a stay-at-home parent or quit their job or whatever it is, and all of a sudden they're quitting their job and they're saying, oh, well, so-and-so is going to support me. Oh, well, yeah, we changed our mind. It's really taking a deeper look. It could also be increased alcohol or drug use from the abusive person or from that victim. This could potentially be a way to self-medicate or a way to cope, an unhealthy way to cope, but we really, really have to look at those things. Other questions, comments, concerns. Again, this is no way a definitive list. These are just some things. And I think it's also important to point out that you are going to know your friendships, you are going to know your relationships best, you're going to know your clients best, and so trusting your gut. It could be that they're concerned about the pandemic. And so this is where it's, what can you do? How can you help? You've started to notice some of these signs. You started to kind of get this like, ugh, something doesn't feel right. So how can you help? Stay in touch, right? This could be as simple as, hey, I'm just reaching out to everybody. I haven't talked with you in a while. Just wanted to see how you were. It could be, hey, have you heard that, I'm going to do a drop-in. I'm going to drop in my mail ballot. Do you want to come with me? Do you want to ride with me? How are you? We'll both wear our masks or whatever it is. Keep it general, because communicating always leaves a trail. Or it could be that you're calling your friend, you're walking with them, their partner still may be monitoring them. So it's not, hey, I'm concerned that you might be in an abusive relationship, or I'm concerned that your partner's being, you're in a domestic violence situation. Keeping it simple of, hey, how are you? Remember that communicating digitally leaves a trail. So if it's text message, if it's an email, if it's an Instagram DM, whatever it is, there's still ways, even if they're deleted, that text message is deleted out of my phone, there's still ways for that abusive partner to see that text message, right? Listen. Listen to what the person is telling you, believe them, and be supportive, right? Be that safe space for them to just talk. How many of us feel so much better after we just vent after a long day? And then, they may be ready to leave, they may not, but allowing them, that victim, to direct where it goes, right? Keeping what they tell you confidential. So many of us have been at, back when we used to brunch or happy hour or whatever it was, and, we'd be talking to our friends and Ellen isn't here. And it's like, oh, did you hear about Ellen? Blah, 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 blah. None of that was malicious. None of that was intentionally harmful. But what happens if we said, oh, did you hear Ellen left Mike? And other people don't know. Now, my friend Veronica might go home and tell her partner, who happens to be friends with Mike. And so we have to be really, really mindful about how we're communicating information. Does that make sense? Okay, I'm gonna assume if there's no answer or no questions that makes sense. Other ways you can help. Help if you can. So you can simply say, how can I help? Is there anything I can do? Hey, it's stressful times. I feel really blessed. I'm working from home, so I have some extra time. If you need me to grocery shop or if you need to pick things up for me, let me know. Is there anything I can do? Hey, have you seen this really great resources? May Dugan has been offering drop-in or drive-through groceries. Have you seen that? I just wanted to make sure I got that information on you. I thought it was a really cool thing. If you can, consider coming up with code or a message system that you or they can use. So it can look like a text message that says, hey, I need groceries. And they don't mean groceries, but that means they need you to call the police, right? But making sure that you're coming up with that code word in a safe space, because with so many folks still at home or working from home, there is always that possibility that that abusive person is there as well. This one is so, so important. Do not try to fix everything. Many of us, and I think the reason that you all are on this webinar is probably that you're helpers in some way, at least a little bit. It is not our job to fix everything. Even as an advocate who has been doing this work for over 10 years, it is not my job to fix. I think so often, I get asked the question all the time, oh, well, how does it feel to save people? I have never once saved anyone. They are doing that themselves. What our and mine and your roles is to be one resource for that victim, that person experiencing domestic violence, to find within themselves that strength, right? So just looking at it in a little bit different way. We have to remember that survivors are already extremely savvy and resilient, and they are the experts in their own lives, right? They are already surviving in this relationship. And it's really important to remember that sometimes simply being in contact, simply listening and validating their experiences is all you can do. Sometimes it might also be the best thing you can do, right? You're not going crazy. You're allowed to feel this way. Thank you for sharing this with me. When you're ready to take next steps, I got you. I'm here. It's really important to understand the dynamics of domestic violence. So what you all are doing here now, right? Knowing what domestic violence is, understanding the red flags, understanding the warning signs, and then knowing how to help, right? Abusers often blame their abuse on other people or external factors. So, oh, well, I'm only abusive when I'm drinking, and I'm only drinking because of this pandemic, right? I'm stressed out with COVID, and that's why I'm doing this, right? It's really important for us to hold abusers accountable. So this is easier said than done, right? This is really important when we might know a couple, and they're a couple friends, and we hang out with them all the time. And, Sally comes and says, Megan, I really need to talk to you. Joe is being abusive. And what I don't want to do is say, Joe would never. Are you sure? Joe's such a nice person, right? Or then talk to my partner and say, oh, Sally said this about Joe, right? We have to believe what our friends are telling us because it's so hard to disclose for fear of that same reason, right? And so it could look like we have this really intense conversation, right? We've talked with our friends and, you don't deserve this, you deserve to feel safe, whatever it is. And they say, yeah, you're right. But then they say, okay, I'm gonna go home. And you're thinking, I'm sorry, what? but that's okay. And so what you can do, and one way to hold abusers accountable is you can say, I want to be here. I want to support you. You are welcome in my home or in my backyard or whatever it is that you feel comfortable with anytime. However, your partner is not. We are allowed to set our own boundaries for ourselves while also still supporting our partners. What we don't want to do is say, I won't talk to you until you've ended this relationship, right? Our safety is important and number one, while also supporting our friends. And so when our friends do disclose, or our clients or whoever, saying things like, tell me how you responded instead of what did you do, right? One thing I want us to think about is all those things under not that, I do not think are malicious. I do not think are ill-intended, but it's taking a step back and sort of reframing our approach, right? Rather than saying, I know you're being abused, say, hey, I noticed that you're coming late to appointments. Hey, I noticed that you seem to be talking about so-and-so a lot. What so-and-so a lot? Can you tell me what's going on? Like, tell me what's going on in your world. Rather than saying, did you do something to try and stop the abuse? Or why don't you just leave? Saying things like, tell me how you've kept yourself safe in the past, right? This one is validating that that victim has already done things to keep themselves safe, but we're also keeping it open-ended and again, allowing that victim to direct where we go. Rather than saying, if someone hit me, I'd leave, right? You can think this, we've all thought it, we're all gonna think it, like there's nothing wrong, but when we think those things, like I would never get in this situation, we have to stop because we don't know. Because while domestic violence is similar, while there's kind of that pattern that we talked about, we don't know because we are not in that situation, right? Can't you just forget it? Saying things like, you deserve to feel safe, right? There are people that can help you. We can also say, you're not alone. You've asked for help, you're here. You've already taken a huge first step, right? I'm really sorry this happened to you. It's okay for you to feel angry, annoyed, sad, frustrated, happy. It's okay for you to feel all those things at the same time, right? Allowing folks space to feel their feelings, right? We can say things like, you're not going crazy, right? That's a really tough situation to be in. You are not the cause of the abuser's behavior. There is never a reason for someone to be abusive. You can be as loud and angry as you want. That doesn't mean someone can put their hands on you. That doesn't mean someone can threaten you, right? I'm really glad that you're here. I'm really glad that you called. Thank you so much for telling me this. Like I feel privileged that you felt safe with me, right? Things may never be the same, but they can be better. One other question I really like is, do you feel safe? Right? So when you're talking with someone, whether you know they're in an abusive situation, unhealthy, or just in general, one question to kind of gauge, is my relationship healthy or not, is do you feel safe disagreeing with your partner? Do you feel safe expressing yourself to your partner? It might feel uncomfortable, you might feel awkward, right? But do you feel safe? And so again, listening and giving your full attention. This doesn't mean I'm listening while I'm on my phone, scrolling through Instagram, or looking what wild things are happening on Twitter right now. Believing what you are being told. As an advocate, it is not my job to investigate. I may be working with Department of Children and Family Services. I may be working with the police. Their job is to investigate. My job is not, right? So it is my job to believe, unless it is proven otherwise, what I am being told. Being supportive, do not judge, and providing resources. So providing resources is really, really important also, because if we do not know something, do not make it up, right? I've been in situations where when I worked in domestic relations court helping folks with civil protection orders, I had a young lady come to me and she said, oh, well, my case manager told me to file a protection order. So I went through my usual spiel. Oh, so can you tell me about that? What's going on? And based on her story, I didn't feel as though she should have filed. And so I walked her through, like, here's what could happen, here's the legal standard, here's da 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 da. But because she had already had a relationship with her case manager, and she had just met me, right? We've been talking for 20 minutes. She didn't know me, who I was. She ended up filing. The order was denied, right? And this is why it's so important when I go back to that initial legal definition. That's why that's so important. So the protection order, the emergency order was denied. He ended up coming for the full hearing. The full order was denied. And last I heard, he had the kids and was living back in a different state. And so if we do not know something, do not make it up. It's really easy for us to say, like, I don't know, but let me find out. Or here's a helpline, right? Because knowing how to provide meaningful resources, you all now have my name. If you or a client needs to call our helpline, you can say, hey, I went to this training with Megan, like name drop, right? Or building relationships with our advocates, right? We have different advocates in the different suburban courts. So if you were based out of Euclid, building that relationship with Vicky so that you can do that handoff, or that we can both sign releases and you all can work with our clients together. Understanding that survivors are the experts on their life, right? Our goal as case managers, as friends, as family might be for the person to leave. That might not be their goal. They might not want to leave. I so often hear, I love my partner, I don't like how they treat me, right? So we really have to acknowledge and allow them space to come to leaving on their own. Because one, they know their limits, right? So we need to also know our limits, whether it's as a mandated reporter, whether it's, I have been an advocate for a really long time, that's not my role anymore. And so if I'm at a training or I'm at a resource table or I'm at another outreach event and someone comes up to me, I have the skills to work with them in that moment, but then my limit stops there and it's connecting them with that advocate that's going to be able to help them a little bit more. And I have to be willing and able to communicate them. I think the other really difficult piece with this is that we want to solve everything. Again, that's not our job. So here's what we can help you with. Here's what we cannot help you with. And being okay with communicating that. It's also important for us to recognize that it simply might be more safe for a person to stay in their relationship. That might change in 6 months. It might change in 3 months. It might never change, but we have to be really, really comfortable with that. And I say that because if you've been in a training with me, you've heard me use this example before. So I worked as an advocate at our shelter for a few years as well. I know I keep saying all this. I feel like I'm the rotating advocate positions in our agency. When I worked in our shelter, there was a young lady who I did her helpline intake with. It was just one of those clients that to this day, she holds a special place in my heart, right? She's one of those people that you make a really good connection with. And so I did her intake, and kind of every shift we would chit chat at least for a little bit. And so I left for the weekend and I said, all right, see everybody later. And I came back and she said, hey, Miss Megan, can I talk to you? And I said, absolutely, what's going on? And she said, Megan, I've made the choice to leave. I made the choice to go home. And I had two options, right? I could have said, that's dumb. No, why would you do that? Or I could have done what I did and said, okay, you have our number. I know that you know what you are worth, and I am here for you, and I support you regardless, right? She ended up coming back a few weeks later. She called and she said, I want to come back to shelter. And she came back. But that's why it's important to support. Because had I said, this is stupid, no, what are you doing? I could have potentially ruined that relationship, and she would not have felt safe then calling me later when she needed help. And so while I wanted to go home, and I went home and cried, right? Full disclosure, and I wanted to bang my head against a wall. It was so vitally important for me to support her in that moment, because I knew that decision would have further consequences, right? Or not, right? It did what it did, open it up to be really great. And so as we kind of close out, I really want us to remember and come back to why victims stay. So fear, right? Those feelings of helplessness, which hopefully now you all feel a little bit more able to combat, right? I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. There are a lot of nonprofits in Cleveland, and sometimes balancing that system is really, really hard. The kids, I don't want my kids to grow up in a single parent home like I did, or they have a job and I don't, so they'll be granted full custody. Denial. I hear so often my situation is bad as my mom's or as bad. And so the question is, how would it be more safe for a person to stay in a relationship if their life is in danger? So that's where it's important for us to have, we're just talking about those difficult conversations. And so one thing, an example we do is every client that we work with is, we do what's called a danger assessment. And so that victim, right? Remember, that victim knows their abuser, that victim knows their relationship best. And so if this person's life is in danger, it's my responsibility as an advocate to say, I have some concerns, right? I'm concerned for your safety, but I cannot make that decision for someone. The moment I say you need to leave, you have to go, I'm in a way doing the same thing that that abusive person does, is I'm taking away that survivor's voice and I'm taking away that survivor's choice. Statistics and research show that simply connecting someone to an advocate or to resources decreases their chances of lethality. But again, I would come back to that person might know they need to leave, right? That victim may know, like, my life is in danger, but they also know that leaving is going to make that danger even more. Victims are most often killed when they leave, and then within the first 3 months of them leaving, and then within the first year, right? It decreases after 3 months, but then a year. And so when someone's life is in danger, that's when it's really, really important for us to safety plan so that they're not just leaving, but that they're leaving safely. And so that's where, does that make sense? Does that answer that question? Yeah. And I think that that's, we're doing, I want to acknowledge that was a little disconcerting, but we're doing a very basic 101. So what I would encourage you all to do also is we have a couple other webinars up on our YouTube. We will also be having a couple other trainings. So going to our information, I will be sending out also as I kind of end, is knowing that you don't have to have all the answers, right? You simply being on this webinar is a huge step. And so it could be, hey, I was on this webinar and it made me think that there's this helpline, right? 391-4357. Have you ever thought about calling? Yeah, I think they have a helpline. You can call, you can give. I tell people, if you don't feel comfortable giving your name, give a fake name. Like, that's fine, right? Just call and talk to someone. Or if you have someone you're concerned about, if you have a friend or family member, that helpline is for you also to work through or talk to someone about. We have an emergency domestic violence shelter. So maybe that person doesn't want to be home anymore and they don't know where to go. We have a shelter. Justice and advocacy. So we have advocates in most of the suburban courts. We have Latina domestic violence projects. We have 2 full bilingual advocates that are Spanish speaking that can work with survivors in that culturally specific way. We have trauma therapy, trauma case management, support groups. Right now our support groups are virtual. So if that's something that is, when we recognize a little bit of that accessibility points, but we are kind of doing the best that we can. We also have prevention and education. And so this is an introduction, so I would really encourage you all to reach out. I'm going to be sending an email, a follow-up email with our packet for Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So that has images, it has a little bit of information that we talked about. It also has a list of our activities, so throughout the month. The best way for folks to get connected to our services, whether it be through therapy, whether it be support group, whatever it is calling that helpline. Call that helpline and let them know, and they'll complete an intake with you. They'll ask some questions like, what's going on, what can we do, and then they'll connect you with that service. So we have about 2 minutes left. Does anyone have any other questions, comments, concerns? Thank you all so much for attending. So with that, so like I said, I'm going to be sending a follow-up email. You can either reach out to me if I'm not that person that I can connect to. So is trauma therapy the same as joining a support group? No. So our support groups are not therapy. They are, what that looks like is it's survivor-led. And so there's an advocate there to kind of help or guide or answer questions, but it is not therapeutic. Other questions? A recording of this will also be up on our YouTube. I'll send the link out once I get it up, probably this this afternoon sometimes, or at least tomorrow. I won't send the email until I do. Yeah, and if you or someone you know want to get those services or get connected with services or just ask questions, I would again encourage you to call our helpline, 216-391-4357. Thank you so much, everyone. I really, really appreciate it. If you all have anything else, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, I know I said this at the beginning and some of you all came late. We are now Journey Center for Safety and Healing, formerly Domestic Violence and Child Advocacy Center. So if you would like, follow us on social media, sign up for our newsletter to stay up to date on what we're doing and all the exciting things that we are offering in October. Thanks, everybody.